Story 1. I drive a valet. The company handbook says you're never allowed to back up. Ever. You absolutely cannot do the job without reversing. It's impossible. It's there because of liability and our insurance policy. This way, it can always be the valet's fault if an accident ever occurs. Perhaps this will answer the most repeated question. If the rule says no reverse, yet you're expected to park a car, then how can you park the car? Answer: never hit anything, and always reverse despite the rules. Expect to be fired should you hit anything in reverse, but probably not. The rule only exists to cover the company's ass, but if they don't feel threatened by you working there and you're an asset, you still will not be fired. And yes, many people are questioning the legality of it, and you're right. It wouldn't hold up in courts, but it's in the handbook, and it's silly. So I posted it. Story 2. I'm a teacher, so I have a million stupid rules I have to follow. But the worst one is that my performance evaluation is based on student improvement on the STAR literacy test. I teach woodshops. Story 3. At my old job, HR held a meeting to tell us that there was too much swearing on the sales floor. Someone raised their hand and pointed out that swearing is very common in our industry, and that it's the way that our customers speak. HR later sent out a memo explaining that swearing should be limited to conversations with clients. It was amazing. Story 4. I used to work at a place which my boss implemented a no more than 2 glasses a day water policy. What a bee. I ignored this rule and complained directly to our CEO, and the matter ended later that day. What was weird, though, was the majority of people actually followed the rule, and some even ratted on me to HR about breaking the rules. I left not long after that because not only was my boss an a-hole, but if my colleagues were going to HR over me drinking water, then I obviously could not trust them. Story 5. Had a workplace time our bathroom breaks and deduct them from our allotted 15-minute breaks or lunch. We had to go see the office manager to get a key to open the restroom. As soon as we left his office, he would start a timer. When you got back, he would stop the timer and tell you how much time you needed to deduct from your lunch or next break. They watched our breaks like a hawk. Also, if you made a mistake, they would stand over you and time you while you fixed it and deduct that from your lunch or breaks. You couldn't bring anything that smells for lunch, and they had no way of heating anything up. I worked out my contract and split. Story 6. My dad told me this one a while back. He used to work for a PR firm. The way he described the office environment, think The Office, but in the 1980s. The company hired a corporate efficiency specialist to come in and improve things. She came in and implemented all kinds of rules, which seemed to follow some sort of caste system. Her philosophy was, the higher your office rank, the more perks you get. Her idea of perks? Number of pictures you are allowed in your cubicle. Whether you are allowed to have a potted plant or not. Coffee mugs were only allowed to senior employees. Others had to use paper cups. Being allowed to leave the office for lunch was also considered a perk. Needless to say, a coup soon followed, and she was tossed out on her hiney. Story 7. Dress code policy is just dumb at my work. Different positions have different requirements, even though we all work in the same office. My favorite rule, though, is the one on shorts. We can wear shorts on Fridays between Memorial Day and Labor Day. However, the shorts can't have pockets on the side. It was written to discourage ratty cargo shorts, but the way in which it's written allows me to wear gym shorts. So, I do. Story 8. Not my current job, but I used to work for some crazy people. You had to stand in a specific area while eating so they could see you on the camera. Don't talk to customers longer than 3 minutes unless you're making a big sale. Even then, keep it short. Answer the phone within 2 rings. Keep the conversation to less than 30 seconds. You can't talk to your coworkers outside of work. You can't talk to your coworkers while at work, even if there wasn't a single customer in the store. I'm sure there's many more, but I just can't think of them right now. Story 9. Old job of mine in a warehouse. Our stations were pretty far apart, so when we'd listen to music, we'd all usually have our own stuff playing. Not a problem since you could barely hear the neighbor's music. Well, the CEO didn't like hearing multiple songs when walking through the warehouse. He made a rule that we all either had to listen to the same music or none at all. Story 10. We got a new vacation policy where you could take unlimited time off. When he announced it, we looked at the big boss like he had a D growing out of his forehead. All the while, he assured us that if we wanted vacation, to take it. Really? A little bit afterward, he changed it to discretionary time off, meaning that if your boss approved it, it was okay. Then it changed to 160 hours should be the max. And if you go over 200 hours, then you probably don't need to work here. Story 11. I once needed a pen. Figured this was a reasonable ask. Went to the supply closet on my floor, which was locked. Asked the floor's admin, and she told me to go to the main supply room in the basement. Went to the basement and explained my situation of needing a pen. They told me all requests for supplies must be approved by my department head. Problem is, being new, I'd never met my department head. She also worked in San Francisco. I worked in Milwaukee. So I needed to send an email both introducing myself and asking her if I had permission to get a pen from the supply closet. Story 12. Firemen. Our risk management department decided long ago that poles were too risky for us. So we used the stairs. We have poles. Anyway, the newest rule is no free weights. As in no free weights to work out, to stay fit. Go into burning high-rise? Absolutely. Walk around the station carrying 40-pound dumbbells? Too risky. Story 13. We weren't allowed to wear jackets unless they are purchased from the resort gift shop with the hotel name logo on it. They are $50 plus, and we don't get reimbursed. But it's the price you pay to stay warm in the cold months. Story 14. Former job. There was trouble when I, officially, moved desks and my new desk had a phone with a call display. Apparently, call display phones were allowed for people at a certain pay level. Your pay level also governed the height of your cubicle walls. My manager's solution was to promote me. Another former job, we were mandated to work on an engineering-related research project outside of work hours, because a responsible engineer always gives back to the engineering community. I could live with that. However, your project had to be related to the company's business. Story 15. We have to do all of our paperwork at least 3 times. There's a copy of it in our personal folders, a copy online, and a copy in our store folders. Not only does it waste time and paper, but forgetting to do one has gotten people fired. They did the other 2 identical pieces of paperwork confirming that yes, they did take out the trash and yes, they did check the store voicemail. But how dare they forget to do the 3rd piece of identical paperwork? Our weekly visits from corporate revolve around whether or not we've all done this paperwork. It's so redundant. Story 16. My workplace doesn't let you use the word problems. Instead, we have to say challenges if something is wrong, as a problem is a negative word, and challenges promote the fact that there is room to fix said problem. Story 17. Former job at a law office. One of the partners sent an email to the entire staff that employees were not allowed to gossip in the building. What was everyone gossiping about, you ask? Oh, said partner was divorcing his wife and sleeping with one of the associate attorneys in the firm. But, don't gossip. Story 18. All the extra toilet paper in the building has to stay in a single closet where it can be overseen by the toilet paper queen. I heard her shrieking the other day when she discovered someone had hoarded 1 spare roll of toilet paper upstairs. So the people who work upstairs wouldn't have to walk down multiple flights of stairs when the toilet paper ran out. Story 19. I used to work for the now long-defunct books, movies, and music store Media Play. Just one of the 285 reasons that poorly run business ran into the ground was the tardy attendance policy. If you were literally 1 second late clocking in, even hours before the store opened, it was a really, really big deal. You'd not only be formally written up, but lectured like a child, oftentimes even berated. If you were tardy 3 times, bye-bye. However, if you no-showed and then called 2 hours later saying you were sick, story okay, thank you, feel better. This trained everyone to just take a sick day instead of being half a second late to work. I can't tell you how many times you'd see a coworker screeching into the parking lot before work after fighting traffic from a wreck or whatever, noticing it was 8:01 and then slowly driving off to go home and feign being sick. This was particularly upsetting when it was a pull-down stock week, when we needed every hand on deck but had unusually early shifts. My job years ago tried to implement a very strict attendance policy like that, where if you were 1 second late, you would get written up. Till one Saturday, a guy who had worked there for like 30 years shows up to work 30 seconds late. They pull him into the office and write him up. He then gets up and tells them he's going home. Working Saturdays was voluntary, and he basically said, "I don't have to be here, so I'm going home." He was doing them a favor by working that day, but when they wrote him up for being 30 seconds late, he basically effed them over just by going home. That policy didn't last too much longer. For the most part, if you're a few minutes late, it's no big deal at all. If you're late all the time, they'll have a word with you or write you up. But they understand stuff happens sometimes that's out of your control to cause you to be late. Story 21. When I was in the military, I saw a buddy of mine sitting outside crying. I went and consoled him as best I could. Apparently, he was just depressed and unhappy. After he was feeling a bit better, I went to go and find someone to tell them what was happening. They knew. In fact, he had been crying so much lately that they had instituted a no crying at your desk policy, which is why he was outside. Story 21. I worked as a call receiver. We never saw a customer. We were only on the phone with them. Rule: your hair must only be a natural color. I dyed my hair the same exact color that someone from a different shift had. I was reprimanded. I told them that if the rule is not enforced for everyone, they couldn't single me out. Their reasoning for letting the other person have that color but not me? Mine was my real hair, dyed an unnatural color. Hers was a weave that could be changed very easily. Really? Then why hasn't she been asked to change her hair? Because that crap is expensive. They gave up trying to convince me they were in the right. One of my sisters actually got fired from a job for something similar. She's a natural blonde, but kept her hair dyed red for years. When she decided to go back to her natural hair color to cut expenses, professional dye jobs are not cheap, her boss flipped out and insisted that she go back to red, pointing out that the company had a rule that prohibited dyed hair. He didn't believe her when she pointed out that this was her natural hair color, and fired her for insubordination and violating company policy when she flat out refused to go red again. Actually, she did offer to go red again if the company paid the styling bill. When she went in to pick up her last check a few days later, she took in a handful of pictures of herself to prove that blonde really was her natural color. Her boss just looked at them and said, "That just means you've been violating company policy for years, and that I should have fired you a long time ago. Don't bother using us as a reference." She was talking to a lawyer about a possible lawsuit, but I don't think anything ever came of it. Story 22. I work in retail, and we have on-call shifts. Your name will be listed on the schedule for a certain time as a call-in, so you have to call in 1 hour before your shift to figure out if they need you for the workday or not. For example, you would be listed as on call for 2 p.m., and wouldn't know until 1 p.m. if you were working that evening. If you don't call in, it's considered not showing up for a shift, but there's no extra pay for the shift whether they need you or not. So for 3 days of the week, I don't know if I have to work or not. Can't make any solid plans to do anything except call my work and ask if they need me. I can't imagine having children or elderly that need taking care of because it would be such a hassle to arrange care for them just an hour before having to work. Story 23. This handbook can be changed without notice at the company's discretion. So, medical leave? 3 days medical leave per year. Fine, I'll use my PTO and expect to get disability for the remaining time. After I have major surgery, an addendum 2 weeks later. Medical leave for surgery must have written documentation from a doctor outlining your recovery schedule and when you may return to work. When I return on a limited schedule 6 weeks later, the HR manager comes into my office. You didn't have the authorization letter before surgery, so you better be here or face the unfortunate circumstance of disciplinary action. While I'm at it, since I'm under contract for 5 years, does anyone know about the legal definition of peonage? Story 24. I used to work for Amazon in Ireland, and their toilet breaks were crazy. Maximum of 10 minutes a day, but also a max of 20 minutes per week. You had to change the status on your computer so everything was recorded, and some managers would call you out on it and even go as far as threatening your job. I had an understanding with my manager and told him if I need to take a crap, then I'm going for it. Like any good manager, he just told me that as long as I give him the numbers he wants, then I could do what I want. I can't speak for other employees in the business, but I have heard the stories. Incidentally, I now work in construction where someone isn't looking over your shoulder and checking every minute of every day. If you haven't seen the great movie Office Space, watch it. Describes my situation perfectly. To answer your other question, my manager was looking for performance numbers. I was the one looking for 1s and 2s. Story 25. There was an issue where there was too much socializing going on the factory floor, particularly when people were working while sitting down. False, skewed supervisor perception. So they made everybody stand. When that presented ergonomic problems, they brought in these weird chairs that made you sit at a slant, had no backs and no wheels, so they wouldn't cause distractions. No part of it made any sense. I feel it. At my old job as a pet bather at a pet chain, we had a stool in the salon to sit at while using the computer, and I had a personal step stool for sitting while brushing large dogs on the floor. The cashiers next door complained that they weren't able to sit, yet we were, so all stools were ordered out of the salon. I thus had to kneel, squat, or sit on the floor to brush every dog over 75 pounds. You try convincing a Labrador that the short table that goes up into the air is safe for a dog his size. Story 26. A rule that said if you have time to learn, you have time to clean, which fairly obviously meant if there was no work, then you should be cleaning things. It was an aircraft servicing station that was fairly small, but we needed a crew of at least 3 people for larger planes. The problem was that sometimes there were just no planes, so there was no work. We would clean for a couple of hours and then just run out of stuff to clean, but according to management, that was no good. We had to be busy. It got to be that we would fight over work when it came in because everyone was so bored, and finding pretend busy work was much, much harder than just working. I remember getting the crew together to pick up pebbles off the taxiway for a couple hours. There's an old joke in aviation, go sweep the taxiway. So we actually did. Story 27. At my last workplace, we had to pay 50 cents to use a K-Cup. It was an office. They also had a no websites or YouTube policy, and policed us using the security cameras. We'd get messages if they noticed us on a site, and it was a well-known fact that the manager watched Netflix in his office and played World of Warcraft while watching the security cameras, to make sure people weren't slacking. Story 28. Not my current job, but at my last job at a store/cafe, an unspoken rule, as in me and my manager were never told this by our boss, was that we were not allowed to let a health inspector see anything that they came to inspect while still getting a good grade. We followed health and safety laws, but our bosses didn't. We were one of the smaller stores/cafes in this chain of 20-plus stores and cafes. The health inspector must have realized that it was the company's fault for all the health and safety breaches because we, the staff, were given near full marks on the staff's health and safety responsibilities. But the boss's responsibilities was a different story. No fly killer in store, despite them being attracted by our bakery part and us having a fly killer out back for over a month, but no one was ever sent to install it. No mouse or rat traps, only one sink. Law requires 2. One for hands and one for dishes. No hot water. The counter where we put coffee down wasn't nailed down, and we actually had a customer attempt to sue over a spilt coffee. Some of our bakery was expired, but we were made to put it out because, according to our company's food manager, they looked okay, so they must be okay. The list goes on. Our manager ended up showing the health inspector months of emails and texts and WhatsApp messages informing the bosses of these health and safety breaches and asking them to be fixed, all of which were promptly ignored. Later that day, our boss calls and screams over the phone at my manager, tells him that it's our fault and it's our job to make sure the health inspector never finds out about all of that. Over the next week, she comes in every single day, where she just watches us work from the office on the security cameras and yells out at us for every little thing and makes a massive deal over everything. Like, for example, I had a mini sneezing fit one of those days and was yelled at in front of customers because I was going to infect everyone and all of our food. So glad to be out of that hellhole. Last I heard, a few of the stores she manages, 4 to 5 store managers quit all in 1 week while she was on holiday, so she took over managing those stores. Are failing with massive sales drops and mass employee walkouts ever since she took over them. Hope to God she loses her job.